I can only thank my English teacher and the way she made me feel the delicate stir of poetry in my young bones. But what are the limitations of classroom teaching? And how much agency should be given to contemporary poetry is something that requires a great deal of accountable and responsible policy making and implementation. You all will agree it's just not about the teacher. It isn't only about the interaction, or it isn't what the teacher decides. It has a lot more to do with the academic system, because teaching is a part of the ecosystem. And I would like to invite Jagari Mukherjee to moderate this session. Jagari is a poet, editor, reviewer. Jagari's sensitive poetry peels away layers and exposes the intricate web of biases and expectations. Jagari says, "My idea of paradise is a reading nook with a glass-topped table and shelves full of my notebooks and journals." Jagari, I completely agree with your idea of paradise. And I would like to read a few lines from Jagari's poem called Ornaments. The heavy silver dry fruits box I keep like a lover on my bed. I heap ornaments in each empty squared space. I would like to invite our panel of experts and thought leaders, Achindu Kamei, short story writer, poet, and ultra runner, who very poetically manages to make dystopia meet hope, even as she invites us to analyze geographical and historical context through her poetry. Bhavna Vij Arora, professor and poet. Her poetry is poignant and contemplative. She talks about dislocation in many forms and explores the labyrinths of societal context. And Jayanthi Manoj, poet and professor, articulate, jasmine fresh, and deeply intuitive, as is her poetry. I had the honor of reading One Teppakulam Afternoon, full of beautiful imagery, and that poem has lodged itself in my heart. So please come, join us, and Jagari, please take over.
Writing. She has an anthology of poems to her credit and has her individual poems published in national and international journals and anthologies, including Hibiscus Anthology by Hawakol. She is an associate professor of English, teacher, mentor, life skills trainer, and has held various administrative responsibilities. She loves to work for regionally backward students, leadership training for young adults and teachers, and conscious communication. She has also published a non-fiction critical book on Mordecai Richler, Texts and Contexts, New Historicist Approach. She has a YouTube channel, Voices and Whispers, to share content on select literary topics, poetry readings and conversations with teacher mentors and writers. She loves to travel, she loves silence, listening, and learning to create or recreate beautiful spaces and memories through lessons from pain to purpose. Ma'am, before I ask my question, I would like to share yet another but a shorter anecdote. Now, even I started the previous anecdote saying once upon a time. So even longer ago than that, when I was a bachelor's student, we had a book in the second year of college called English for Practical Purposes. And we hated that book. We detested it. It contained such practical stuff as how to write a formal letter asking your principal for leave, how to write a job application, how to write your CV, how to give interviews. And we were bored out of our minds. Later on, when I went to university, the same MA class which had the handsome Dr. Raj Rao, it had another professor And he too detested this particular book because it was written by a rival professor. So he said to us in class, "What nonsense! English for practical purposes. Writing a leave application is a practical purpose. How about writing a love letter or a poem? Isn't that practical also?" No, as George Bernard Shaw said, man cannot live by bread alone. We need poetry and music and art and literature and all the beautiful things. So, what do you mean by English for practical purposes? So, a related question which I would like to ask Jayanthi ma'am is that would you teach contemporary Indian English poets in your English communication classroom? Like, how important do you think it is to bring poetry into a class of practical teaching?
So thank you, Jagri, for the wonderful anecdote with which you started with the question, and a warm good afternoon to the erudite scholars and inspiring writers. And it's a joy to be on board with Ethos. A special note of gratitude to Kirtiji and Havakal for bringing up this topic on limitations of classroom teaching and where do we place the contemporary poets. I'm sure the whole panel and the entire audience would agree with me that on one hand, we have a voluminous output of contemporary poetry, and on the other hand, we do have an unupdated syllabi which still has only Anglophone poets. So there is a need to bridge this chasm, and how do we do it? And answering Jagri's question, I would like to say that students are of various kinds, and I deal with a heterogeneous group where we have a mix of both regionally backward students who've had Tamil as their medium of instruction till school, and once they come to college, they take up literature. And the answer they would give is, I took up literature so that I thought I will learn English, what they have not done in the past 12 years. So that's the understanding. And I will also have a mix of the very motivated kind of well-read students also. And Tamil Nannul so beautifully speaks about 8 kinds of students in a classroom, and I'm sure we were one, and we see many of them in our classroom. Some students are like soil. In Tamil, they say man, which means they need attention, and when that attention is given, they grow intellectually, emotionally, and academically. And some kind of students are like tea filter. Tea filter in Tamil they say neyeri. What does a tea filter do? It retains what is not required and lets go of the essence. So when I go and teach, say as Jagri asked, suppose I have to go and tell them a story to teach them some basic communication, they'll remember the story and forget the letter writing. So that happens. Yes? And some kind of students are like goats. Goats, in Tamil they say, Aadu nuni pullada meyo, meaning the goat will feed only on the peripheral. So it talks about shallow learning. So that happens when last minute they get prepared for an examination. They just come in, they ask, what is the important question? Okay, tell me a few lines. The one who has prepared for one full semester will talk to the person, speak everything, whatever that she or he has learned, and she'll say, okay, enough. And sometimes the other one who really listen to it will get more marks than what the person has shared. And some kind of students are like buffaloes. Buffaloes always do not have a purpose. Okay, they have a kind of sense of distraction. If you're so prepared into a class, you just go in. They really pick you up with a question, and they have the whole attention towards them. And there are some kind of students who are like parrots. And what do parrots do? They learn by repetition. They learn by repetition. They learn only by repetition. And nothing more than that. They're very, very faithful. And some kind of students are like the cow. The cow chews the cud, and these students really motivate you because they ruminate on what you speak to them, and they come back with a question or an extra reference, and you feel so obliged. Oh my God, I'm here for this child. Okay, and there are some kind of students who are like the mythical swan. The mythical swan knows what to take and what to leave out, and that is they are evaluative learners. So, in my classroom, in everyone's classroom, especially when you deal with a heterogeneous group of students who have taken in literature to learn their basic English, which is also possible, how to make poetry happening. How to make poetry happen. Not limited to what Jagri says as just letter writing or the technical part of it. We also have another limitation, or it can be a challenge, and any challenge can also be an opportunity for the present teacher. That is, we deal with the Z generation. The Z generation who are hyper connected, hyper social, who are very instant. They want everything with a click of button. And what happens is they would prefer a T20 match to a T50 match. They cannot sit through a pro kabaddi match to a full kabaddi match. They would like to read, have a metro read rather than a novella or a novel. They would like to have a pizza or a burger or any bite rather than a full meal. So what happens to this kind of a Z generation, which is in my classroom, wherein I have around 50 minutes or 60 minutes and I have to engage. In educational instructional strategies, we call it as a chunk and chew method, where it is not precisely that is called as 10 plus 2 formula. It's just a kind of calculation for the teacher. But then intervening our inputs with learning engagements from the students makes learning happen for the Z generation. So, this being the background, adding to it, we have a post pandemic scenario where, in the very first hour, the student can be so tired because they are so much into the screen energy.
Yeah, so true.
So much that their attention span, you can see drooping eyelids. I'm sure all of us who teach would experience that. So, what happens is this limitation and this challenge is also an opportunity for a 21st century teacher wherein we can make poetry demonstrative, engaging. So, what I have tried doing in this kind of a heterogeneous classroom is when I introduce contemporary poets, sometimes it is part of the syllabi, or it is like once a week I have a poetry talk with them, wherein once I ask them to read that up or give them a clue on the writing part of it, and then put them into a discussion. I interweave my classes with basic fine arts, meaning to say, have a group to compose a song out of the poem which can be engaging, or at the end of a poetry class or somewhere in the middle, I ask them to draw what they have understood, because I have a heterogeneous group wherein a few of them understand everything that you say, the others may not even understand the language part. So whatever they can really understand, that would be put into a kind of drawing. And also, sometimes I ask them to do a kind of a group collage of what they have understood. Or I have also hosted mock literary festivals in my classroom, wherein I ask them to write about something, compile it as now you have, they have their computers, have put it into a kind of a book, and the various groups should invite a reviewer from the other group so that they get to read also, and a kind of a review culture also is there. And that person, like how Dr. Sukrita released the book, the person comes and releases the book. So what happens is these are examples of making poetry more demonstrative. And in all this, I understand this is possible when the teacher is passionate about poetry. One of the major limitation is that the curriculum can be updated when it is in an autonomous situation. If we are a part of the university, it cannot be done. And in an autonomous situation, even if you have the liberty, the person has to know what is happening, because on one part we have all literary festivals, so much of publication that's going on. But I know the rest of India, say at least 80%, they will not really know who's the contemporary poet. Yes, that is a great divide. So what happens is, I make it a point, like today morning, I think the poet from Singapore said, I always make it a point to come to India when there is a literary fest. I make it a point, whenever I get an invitation, at least once a year, I move out of my place, go meet the contemporary people. So I go back, I show them the videos that I have taken, give them a link to the books that are there. It may be part of the syllabi, it will not be a part of the syllabi, but one thing that can appeal to them is contemporary poets write about the age in which they live. So these students will be able to appreciate poetry of their age. And then of course we make a space. I bring it down to the assignments or seminars where we create a space for them so that they come and explore whatever they have experienced about it. And I also once tried, for one semester, I tried coffee with a new voice, meaning to say, like every, say, twice a month, students could come up with a new voice they have found. At the same time, I should also tell you that students do not really know who is a contemporary poet, because all of them are online. Many of them are online, and they are on Facebook. And unless you have a better reading, you will not be able to identify. You have plagiarized work, AI generated literature, so many things are there. But then when we create a space for this and when we have conversations, we also allow the children to choose what the right literature, what kind of poetry it is about. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, you have, ma'am. And I must say, I would be seeing buffaloes and cows and goats. So I don't know how lucky my students are going to be.
And the whole job is, once we identify, we also have an opportunity to elevate each one of them into cows and mythical swans, because our teachers have done it for us.
That is true. I wonder what I was. Thank you very much. And yes, it is true that a contemporary Indian English poet would need more exposure in order for people to know him or her. And in an autonomous institution, it would